Good evening. Oh, thank you. I was a teacher for a while. If you don't respond, I don't know what to do. Welcome. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm glad that the weather was good today. I thought it might, ice. And it's a beautiful day, and still you chose to come here. Thank you for being here. We are the Iowa City Flute Choir. My name is Heather Neuenschwander. I'm the director of the group, and you're going to meet many of these other wonderful flutists as well today as we go. Throughout our concerts, we do a little bit of teaching about the pieces, about the composers, and about the instruments, because I know you've already got your eyes on at least one of the flutes, and you're like, what is that? And how can I get one? So we'll talk to you about that too, but not right away. If we put it at the beginning, you'll leave. So that's coming up. The Iowa City Flute Choir is a semi-professional flute choir, which means that we have members that have a degree or multiple degrees in music. We also have members that are amateurs, adult amateurs. Some played after high school and continued to play, and they were looking for a place to perform on the side. Some took a bunch of time off after school, and then in retirement even said, I want to play my flute again. And so they joined our group. So we're happy to have about, right now, 25 flutists in total, a mixture of professionals and amateurs. You're not looking at 25 right now because as we are a volunteer group, every single performance, every single rehearsal, we never know who we're going to get. And I'm thrilled we have this many today. This is our third year. We were founded 3 years ago. A group of 4 of us got together and said, I want to make a flute choir. So we did what flutists do. We met over coffee, and we formed this flute choir. And speaking of coffee, that is how I start just about everything I do in life. You don't have a program, so I'm going to tell you the pieces. The first song is called Coffee-lation. It is a mixture of coffee and elation. When you read it, that's a lot easier, but I have to explain it. Coffee plus elation equals coffee-lation. You'll hear some extended techniques on the flute, which means the flutes will be doing things besides just playing notes normally. And this is to show a little bit of a story. So you'll hear the alarm clock go off in the morning, and then you'll hear the person waking up, making a cup of coffee, and then drifting back to sleep. And then that alarm clock goes off again, and you will hear the exact moment that the pot of coffee is ready. That is my favorite part. I'm pretty sure that you'll hear it. And then the end of the piece is pure elation as the character enjoys their cup of coffee. Coffee-lation. You hear when the coffee was ready? I knew you would. I always wait to hear the chuckle. You didn't hear it? Well, you probably don't drink coffee yet. Because I think I know who you are, and I think maybe you have. I tell my kids they have to reach their intended height. Anyways. So, I talk about flute choir just a lot. Some of you are here because I talk about flute choir a lot. It's really ridiculous. And the thing that I hear the most back is, so what is a flute choir? A flute choir is just like a choir of voices. When you sing in a choir, you have soprano, alto, tenor, and bass. And as you can see, so do we. We have the smallest instruments down to the largest instruments playing together in a choir. We're going to split up our demonstrations here, but we're going to start with the smallest of the instruments. And to demonstrate the piccolo is Caleb. He is new to our group this semester. He's a grad student at the University of Iowa. And he's new to Iowa. It's his first winter that he's bearing because he came here from Texas, correct? Yes. So think warm thoughts for Caleb as he teaches you about the piccolo.
So as Heather said with that lovely introduction, my name is Caleb Estrada Valentin. I'll be teaching you guys a little bit about the piccolo tonight. It's our smallest of the flute family, and something different about this instrument that you can very easily see is that it's black, and that's because it's constructed out of wood, granadilla wood, which is also called African blackwood. You'll see piccolos that are built with precious metals like silver, but most ensembles prefer to use the wooden piccolo just because they have a warmer sound, they blend easier with the ensemble. But if you go to Austria, you'll see a lot of professional ensembles playing with metal piccolos because they project really well. It is an octave higher than our regular concert C flutes, and I'm going to ask Connie if she can give us an A real quick so that I can show you what that means. So it's the same pitch, it just sounds an octave higher than what the flute would do if I were to do it on this instrument. Fingerings are all the same on this instrument, so I don't have to do anything new. I just have to put the instrument up to my face and play the music as I read it. I have a little excerpt to share with you guys from Bizet's Farandole, a tune that we hear a lot during the holiday season. So here's an excerpt from Farandole.
And now to demonstrate the C flute for you is Connie McCain. Connie is an elementary school librarian, and I always think, who better to teach you about the flute than an elementary school teacher?
Welcome, thank you for being here tonight. Yes, I'm just showing you the regular concert C flute that you would see most frequently in bands and orchestras, jazz bands. Sometimes when you hear the flute, it can be very intricate and technical. Other times it's very lyrical. And then as you heard in the last piece, sometimes it doesn't sound much like a flute at all. But most of the time when you hear the flute, it'll sound a little like this.
Caleb and Connie. Our next song is called Rosa Medra and is by a composer named Ralph Vaughan Williams. This was originally composed as an organ piece, and it is arranged here for flute choir. Some of you may know it. It's kind of well known for being played at Princess Diana's funeral. But the composer added a subtitle to this piece called Lovely. And I think of that every time we perform this. I think the word lovely. Next, we're going to demonstrate for you the alto flute, our alto voice, the alto flute. And to do that, we have Mr. Hal Ide, a well-known painter, an artist here in Iowa City, and also an amazing alto specialist. You're gonna come here? Then I'm gonna go somewhere else.
Masks and hearing aids, what a combo. The alto flute is pitched 4 notes lower than the C flute. And it's a fair amount bigger than the C flute. Can we? So it's sort of like grandpa flute or something. It was invented not to be lower than the C flute, but to have a different voice. A little bit mellower voice, a little more dulcet, a little softer. You need a bit of a wingspan to play this flute. You can sometimes find it, actually most commonly find it, with a curved head joint similar to the bass flute here, so that your hands can be in here instead of out here. I'm just fine out here. I have no trouble with that. The alto flute, if you are a highbrow classical music person, you would know Stravinsky's Rite of Spring and know that that's full of alto flute solos. It became very popular in the 20th century. In the Rite of the Spring, for instance, it sort of plays the role of the wise old woman sitting by the fire, maybe weaving spells or incantations. We're low, we're sneaky. And you hear it in a lot of 20th century music. You hear it particularly in film and television scores because it's a colorful instrument. We come in usually, and a lot of sci-fi and horror flicks, frankly. So we come in when the teenagers get to the campsite. And you get the first idea that there's something wrong. By the time the trombones come in, all over. So we foreshadow. But if you are not a highbrow classical music type, I bet you know the alto flute anyway. If, and I don't think I see anybody out here who might qualify, if you happened to be alive in the year 1968. Because in that year, a jazzer studio guy was called in for a session for a pop group, and he put down an alto flute solo in one take, legend has it, and I think some of you may recognize it. I'm just going to play it for you right now. If you know what it is, shout it out when I'm done. Anybody? California Dreamin'. All right.
Next to demonstrate the bass flute is our only bass flutist today, but not our only bass flutist all the time, but we're so grateful to have her here today. Donna Grunstad, who I just learned is a retired French teacher who picked up the flute just prior to retiring. Do you want me to bring you? Oh, I'll try. You're gonna try to come over? It's not the easiest thing to move, so this is an honor.
Okay. So the bass flute is bigger than the others, but not as big as that one, obviously. And as Hal mentioned, it has a curved head joint because otherwise I'd never be able to reach the keys. So, and the sound of this flute is 1 octave lower than the regular flute. but the music is still written in the treble clef. It's still a C instrument. The fingerings are all the same, so that makes it a lot easier to switch from one instrument to the other. And the bass flute was developed in order to fill out the sound of flute choirs once flute choirs became popular. So you won't see this instrument usually in bands and orchestras. It's mainly for flute choirs. So a lot of times the parts that we play are if you sing bass, you know what bass parts are like in a choir. But sometimes there are some pretty interesting parts, like you get the oompas in a polka, or I have an excerpt to play for you from Jonathan Cohen's Notes from the Flock, and this one is entitled The Buzzard's Ballet.
Let's get cold. And when they get cold, they go flat. So I'm just telling them they can warm them up. Oh, Donna, I'm going to steal your music. Our next piece is titled Umoja, and that is the Swahili word for unity. The composer is Valerie Coleman. If you follow recent classical music, you've heard Valerie Coleman's name, and if you've not, please go home and Google her, or from your phone now, I won't be offended. I am such a Valerie Coleman fan. I love her so much. So it's hard for me to bring down into just 30 seconds about Valerie Coleman, but she's a composer, a flutist, Grammy-nominated flutist and entrepreneur. Performance Today named her their 2020 Classical Woman of the Year. She's an advocate for chamber music, helped form the group Imani Winds. So anyways, this piece was originally composed for a women's choir to celebrate the first day of Kwanzaa. It has been put into several different arrangements. Obviously, we're playing the flute choir arrangement, but there is an orchestral arrangement commissioned by the Philadelphia Orchestra, and it was played at Carnegie Hall in 2019, marking the first time the orchestra performed a classical work by a living female African-American composer. And that is this piece, Umoja. Sorry. that one was new to us and we were a little nervous about it. So we wanted to stand and just shake out the nerves, or maybe that was just me. Anyways, you've been waiting for it. Here it is, Rose Bishop. Rose Bishop, if there's something flute going on really anywhere in Southeast Iowa and beyond, Rose Bishop is a part of it, including the Iowa City Flute Choir, and of course she has the biggest flute, and she's going to tell you all about it right now.
Hi everybody, this is the contrabass flute. It is pitched 2 octaves lower than the C flute, 1 octave lower than the bass flute. It is about 9 feet in length, and it's often lovingly referred to as plumbing. It can do a lot of really cool percussive techniques that are used in the more contemporary music, such as key clicks. I don't know if you can hear me kind of clicking away sometimes if I slam my fingers down a little too aggressively. Another thing that it's used for is sort of percussive beatboxing, like that, which is always fun. But in flute choirs, a lot of times it is used to round out the bass voices in the ensemble. Flute's a very high-pitched instrument, so it's nice to have our altos, bass, and the contrabass to sort of round out the bottom. The excerpt I'm going to play for you is from our very first piece, Population. Usually with the contrabass, we get sort of the low, long-lasting notes. We don't get really cool melodies, except occasionally we get some really cool stuff. So this is the solo from Copulation. Thank you. So one other thing I would like to say, as the social media coordinator for the Iowa City Flute Choir, I would love if all of you could follow us on Facebook at the Iowa City Flute Choir to learn more about us, who we are, and all of our events that we plan every semester. We do a lot of really cool stuff, and we would love to see you at our future events. So if you could like us and share our concert info, that would be really awesome. Thanks so much.
Our next piece, I'm louder than Rose, I know, I hear that. Our next piece is titled Simple Gifts. This is a hymn tune that many of you might know. It's often sung or played around Thanksgiving time, so you know, close enough. It is arranged here by a flutist named Phyllis Loki. Yeah, that's all I really want to say about it. Simple Gifts. So we were formed 3 years ago. I was new to Iowa City and looking for a place to play, and the whole process led to wanting to create the Iowa City Flute Choir, and I laugh as I don't play a note tonight, but I love every minute of it anyways. So when the pandemic shutdown came, we were relatively new and growing and adding members weekly, and had to have to cancel that first rehearsal, not knowing when we would get back together again, was more heartbreaking than I could say. We took some time away, like everyone did, and tried to survive. We tried Zoom events where we didn't play, but we talked about the flute, or sometimes we just talked about grocery shopping. I don't know. I offered toilet paper. It's true, there's a story there. We actually got together in my yard, some of us, and some of us played in the yard while others joined on Zoom. We did a lot to try to make it, and once we realized it wasn't coming back, within the 3-week hiatus I originally said we would, we did do rehearsals on Zoom for a while in breakout rooms, and the mute button was our friend and our enemy all at the same time. This past spring, we finally planned a short, just outdoors rehearsal and performance cycle. We planned 3 performances, and we got 1 of those, and the other 2 were rained out. So we took the summer off again and regrouped, and we are so grateful to be here at St. Andrew Presbyterian. We normally meet at Grand Living Bridgewater Retirement Home, and given the different variants right now of COVID-19, we didn't feel comfortable being there, and St. Andrew welcomed us so gratefully, and we all walked into this space and thought this is the perfect place to be for us right now. And it is a dream that we are now finishing the 3rd of our 3 performances we planned. I didn't think it would happen, and I'm so happy to be here today. So our next piece is Amazing Grace. It is arranged by Jennifer Higdon, another living American composer. Again, if you don't know Jennifer Higdon, look her up. She's fantastic. And I didn't really realize, she's also a flutist, taught herself the flute, and studied flute at Bowling Green University. She won the 2010 Pulitzer Prize for Music. She has 3 Grammy Awards for Best Contemporary Classical Composition. You're now going to wonder how you didn't know her name before, but now you do. You're welcome. This was arranged for string quartet or flute quartet, or our arrangement is for flute choir. I asked a couple people to maybe share what flute choir has meant to them. So first speaking, I forget what the word is for without notes. Anyways, Marnin Coons.
Hi. So I learned about flute choir late in 2019. A Facebook friend had sent me a link knowing that I used to play flute for the Iowa Marching Band and did the Alumni Marching Band and Pep Band every once in a while, but I'd been looking to do something a little bit, more than once or twice a year. So she sent me the link. I went with my mom to their performance at the Iowa City Library. My mom had been finishing up cancer treatments and was very excited when I saw the contrabass flute, and I was like, I got to play that. So she, stayed in the audience afterwards when I went up, and I was just like, how do I join? I want to play with you guys. And they were just like, taking the winter off, but we'll send you information. February 2020, I joined, did one performance, and then pandemic hit. So hiatus. Did the virtual events every once in a while. May, my mom's cancer came back, and the events kind of helped center me on something away from my mom's treatment. It was just, something to do outside, even though I wasn't outside. My mom passed away in December of 2020, but the flute choir's Zoom rehearsals started again, and it was just a great way for me to get back and centered, especially with the very difficult passages where that's the only thing you can focus on is getting those fingerings, like emoja. Still working on that, I will get it. But just finding this group that has folded me in, I could just be myself just right away. It is just, some of you guys didn't know the story, but every week I'm just so glad to be here with you guys.
Thanks, Martin. So I'm a little embarrassed to read this one, but somebody said they would write something and then emailed it right before I got here, so I didn't have time to print it. I normally wouldn't have my phone out here. I find phones to be very distracting, but here it is, and I'm going to read. Am I allowed to say who this is from? Okay, we're going to say no. It's from an anonymous member, but I think it's going to give it away a little bit. She says, what seems like many years ago, pre-COVID days, I attended a flute choir concert at the Iowa City Public Library. This was the best group ever, so entertaining and beautiful. The program included the explain the sizes and sounds of the different flutes, and on the way out, I heard one little Muppet whine to her mother, but I want to play the big one. Many a young flutist was born after that concert. I am an old flutist, she says. I took up the flute in retirement so I could play with New Horizons Band. I love playing group music, but I was not nearly good enough to play in the Iowa City Flute Choir, and yet I do. This is the most inclusive group you will ever find, from professionals to the merely wonderful people like me. Oh, to the merely wonderful to people like me. Sorry, I heard that wrong. She says, all are welcomed and valued for what they are able to contribute. I had met Heather in church, she says 5 years ago, but I'm going to correct, it was 3 years ago. And she said that she was a flute player. Great, I thought to myself, just what Iowa City needs, another flute player. I get that a lot. As it turns out, she is exactly what Iowa City needs. She brought all the wonderful flute divas together to start this group, the name of which should really be Never Too Many Flutes. I joined an experienced flute choir on Zoom. Part 3 practice room was led by Rose, and I met my partners Bonnie and Connie. That's right, we have 2 Connies and a Bonnie in this group. We got to perform a concert one beautiful Sunday afternoon outside of the Walker Winery. Such a thrill to actually play together. Now we are able to rehearse together in this lovely space. It's such a privilege for me to be here. So our next piece is titled A Little Joy by a composer friend of ours, another living composer named Jonathan Cohen. He's an engineer / flutist. He's another contrabass specialist, and he's named his contrabass Tiny, very appropriately. A Little Joy. Come to the last piece of the concert. So it's my time to say thank you, and thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing in our little joy and perhaps a lot more. We really want to thank St. Andrew Presbyterian, especially Jeff back there running all of our technical needs. Thank you. And Mary Jane, the music director here at St. Andrew, and a good friend. I want to thank the Iowa City Flute Choir Board and all of the members of the group and their family members who put up with us, because they do hear us practice a lot, I'm sure. I want to thank the New Horizons Band that let us borrow some equipment that you're about to hear played by my last thank you, Al Grunstad, who will be joining us on percussion for our last piece. The gig doesn't pay well, but he's married to Donna. You might want to put that together. The last piece is called Santa's Symphony. It is a blend of Christmas carols and famous classics. You will hear classic pieces by Mozart, Brahms, Gounod, and Tchaikovsky. I spelled that wrong. You'll hear Eine kleine Nachtmusik, the Nutcracker, Brahms' First Symphony, the Funeral March of a Marionette, and you'll hear a lot of Christmas carols as well. My favorite is when the arranger layers Silent Night with the 1812 Overture. To say it loudly. If you want to come up afterwards to see the flutes, not touch the flutes and play the flutes, ooh, pandemic, but you can come up and see the flutes and ask questions afterwards.